Welcome to Care Smarts 360 on air, a home care podcast. My name is Carolina Gonzaga, one of the sales executive here at Care Smarts. Today, we're addressing a topic that means a lot to me in my career and in my personal life, and it is one of the most emotionally charged topics that families face today in our space of healthcare. Aging at home versus moving out, the tug of war between seniors and their children. Joining us today is a true advocate in the field. We've got Ruth Busalacchi, who is the president and owner of Synergy Home Care of Southeast Wisconsin. This is an agency that started 15 years ago, and Ruth has dedicated her career to providing dignified quality care for individuals of all ages who need supportive home care. She's passionate about empowering families, and she works tirelessly to educate her local community about the options and resources available. Now, I do want to say that in the area of Southeast Wisconsin, she is featured multiple times a week on the Morning Blend, which is a morning show where you can call in for advice, whether you're somebody experiencing health challenges, aging, or whether you're somebody in a position of support. So we get a little taste of that today. In this conversation with Ruth, we will share her insights on balancing safety, autonomy, navigating family dynamics, and making informed decisions that honor our elders' wishes. So stay tuned as we uncover practical strategies and heartfelt stories that illuminate the path to aging with grace at home. Welcome, Ruth. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And when my team prepped me on the topic today, aging at home versus moving out, the tug of war between seniors and their children, I got really excited. We talked a little bit before we started recording. So we have a similar background, caregiver, senior living into the home care space. But the motif, I think, throughout all of those experiences is truly the relationships and that tug of war that we sometimes support and help with families. So I'd love to start by for the audience to learn more about your journey to opening Synergy Home Care, and then we'll kind of get into our topic after that.
Wonderful. Happy to share. As you had mentioned, I started as a caregiver when I was in my early 20s and really found that to be a great niche for me and helped people of all backgrounds, people who were seniors, people who lived in nursing homes, apartment settings, as well as folks with disabilities, adults with disabilities. And then along the years, as I was raising my family with my husband, I worked in group home settings.
Yeah.
The same time as my kids got a little bit older, I went back to college and finished up in human resources and business management because I had a nice background and I wanted it to balance. And then for about 10 years, I was opening and licensing adult family homes and community-based residential facilities, group home living, for a social service organization. While I was doing that, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
Hmm.
And of course, as you know, being in this industry and understanding what the journey might look like for both my father and my mother as a caregiver, I took on a role in my family of being sort of a case manager.
Yeah.
I would see things, right, that my siblings didn't necessarily see because it wasn't their training, but they were
Hmm.
subtle. Maybe it was changes in my dad. Maybe it was changes in my mother being a caregiver. Whatever I would see something change, I would kind of take a pause and I would sit down with mom and dad and I would say, okay, this is what I see, and here are all your options. And then it was, what do you want to do? We did that for 8 years during my father's journey with Parkinson's disease. And I am convinced that because we got on top of things when they were proactive and got in more resources, brought in home care, brought in other funding options for my parents so that my father could stay at home, it did a couple of things. First of all, and most importantly, it gave my father dignity of choice because he was not in a crisis. He wasn't, laying in a hospital bed and social workers and other people telling him what to do. We were getting on it before it became a crisis. And then the other thing it did is it allowed my mother to be both a wife and a caregiver, right? Because we know the
Hmm.
stress of that. So it really was after the passing of my father, and I thought, boy, catching those subtle changes, I could do that. for a living. And I could
Yeah.
hire caregivers who thought like me, and send them out there and they become the experts and they notify us. So that's why I started my journey and my shift for the last half of my career, to be a home care provider and help people find the options and support them on their own journey.
I love that. And I wonder sometimes, well, not wonder because we both have a background, dealing with families and helping them throughout these transitions, but it makes me think of families that do not have that knowledgeable family member that rises up. Now, we all know, and it's a generalization, but that there's often hopefully an adult daughter that will jump in and be that person and learn through her network. It's funny, and maybe you can relate to this. Now I'm in my 40s. My get-togethers with my girlfriends are very different now. We are no longer talking about boys and all that. We're all crying about our parents aging. So, you reach that
Understood.
transition. So it's where I'm so thankful, or I guess grateful to families like ours because we do have that. And I'm sure your siblings appreciated it. But then I think your staff and yourself would be the ones to step in when there isn't that wealth of knowledge and they don't know what to look for. The food in the fridge that's been there all week, or
Right,
what's in the garbage. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
the face-to-face visit, because even a phone call, you're busy as an adult and you're a sandwiched generation, right? You're taking care of your family and you want to check on mom, and so you call and how are things going? Fine,
Yes.
you
Yeah, and they don't
know?
want to complain, right? And
Right.
and do you find as well that your caregivers, so, and I just think about sometimes the conversations that I have with my parents, and my husband remarks because his parents live far away. So their conversations are different. They're a little bit more in depth. With me, it's like 5 calls a day, but it's high
Mm,
and by. And so do you find that when you're choosing caregivers, for example, or even the wealth of staff that you have in the office that wear many hats, do you
right.
find that you're looking for a certain sensibility and the type of personality that may allow somebody to open up to them a little more than maybe their own adult children?
Absolutely. When we hire, we intentionally hire people of all different backgrounds. We want the young, right out of college or right in college, all the way up to someone who is retired or even semi-retired, because people with experience, people with no experience, good cooks, people who like to exercise. We do that on purpose because our goal is to match. We want to understand what your strengths are as a caregiver, because then we want to match you up with the care and supervision that that individual needs. Not everybody wants a certified nursing assistant. They don't need a certified nursing assistant. They might need a companion, you know? So
Yeah,
it's so important that we get to know what our potential caregivers' passions are and understand the vulnerability of
yeah,
someone who needs help.
absolutely. And also going into the home for sure is very vulnerable if you think about it. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, to let someone into your
Yes.
home, that's a big deal. And do you find that you've had to have flexibility? So when you're, creating those relationships with your clients and their families, is there a part of it where you do need to sometimes make a change just because of the dynamic you see?
Absolutely. The one thing I find is occasionally families, adult children, will try to hire privately and manage it on their own. And I always say to them, there is a reason that we have 2 to 3 people in our office every day
Yeah,
managing those schedules because it's a job. It is a job, caregivers' lives, even the most well-meaning caregiver, their lives change. They have situations that come up, and so we have to manage that. Or maybe they're not the right fit after all. Maybe, and we always encourage our families, if it just doesn't feel right, please call us sooner than later. We'll take care of the caregiver on that end. We'll reassign the caregiver to someone else and they won't be hurt. Their feelings won't be hurt. But it's more important that your mother or your father or your husband feels comfortable in their own home, you know?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned
Yeah.
earlier as well that you have a lot of experience, not only with seniors, but also with, adults with disabilities. So
Yes.
What would you say is the biggest difference, if you could describe it, of those types of dynamics and relationships with the family?
Yeah, I think most of the individuals that we care for are adults, even with disabilities. We do have some children that also have disabilities. And when we interview our caregivers, we want to see if they have experience working with someone with a disability. It is slightly different. I think the goals to maintain independence are with our seniors. The goals to learn skills may be with our adults or children with disabilities, right? Everybody, though, however, and I have a mission statement because I feel so strongly in this, and that is to treat each person with dignity and their unique journey, So we want people to know whoever you're working with, don't have pity for them,
Yeah.
have appreciation of who they are, of what they're bringing to the table. And that goes both ways with our seniors as well as our folks with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So your
Yeah.
agency has been around for 10 years, and I know you've probably
15,
seen 15 years. Oh my goodness. Time
2010.
flies.
Yes.
Yeah, time flies when you're
Yes.
having fun. But
That's right.
as we kind of dig deeper into that tug of war scenario,
Yes.
so how do you generally evaluate, let's use seniors for this example,
Sure.
physical, cognitive, emotional readiness to either remain in home or to relocate when families might be looking for advice, or maybe they aren't looking for advice, but you're trying to evaluate or guide them as they might come to assumptions. So
Right.
physical, cognitive, emotional readiness in a senior for staying at home or transitioning to a new environment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I go back to my old world of opening and licensing group homes. I used to open AFH, adult family homes, and community-based residential facilities. What you're really looking at is care and supervision. It comes down to what kind of care does the person need if they need it, and what level of supervision if they need it. And it's all about exiting a home in the event of an emergency. Do they understand what an emergency would be? Do they have the cognitive ability to understand what an emergency would be? And can they
Uh,
physically leave in the event of an emergency or a fire? So it's kind of always, I always look back to, it's really simply based on fire emergencies, right? You can look at
yeah,
that in a hospital. They have a plan based on a fire and how they would evacuate everybody. So it comes down to kind of that simple understanding of what we're looking at. And that's how we learn about the individual. We sit down with the family. There's no charge for that meeting. And it's just to sit down and understand the person, where they're at in the moment, and what kind of natural supports they already have. And then we can say, here's how our services could fit in the current mix. Does that make sense?
yeah, it really does. And I shared with you in our call prior that, my parents are in a situation where my mother has begun to decline. And when there's been an emergency, I'm the one that, I'm going to admit it now, overreacts. I'm like, oh, you can't live on your own. Because when there's an emergency like just happened, I've had to drive in the middle of the night and I have a young child. And I'm thinking that actual description helps a lot,
Yeah.
because there may be a stressful situation. It's an ebb and flow of a dynamic of decline, but it's also not a straight line down. So there could be moments of improvement where maybe they are
Mhm.
more, instead of moving, maybe they need to just pick up a little bit more help from your agency or from their circle of care. So that's very interesting, of that
Yeah.
it's not necessarily what you're feeling in this moment. It's also about how safe would they be in the home if there was an emergency. And often if there's a spouse or a neighbor that would be able to
Mhm.
help them, maybe they wouldn't need to move. I've never thought of it that way, Ruth. So you're already teaching me.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. And especially with folks with disabilities, they may be physically disabled, but cognitively, they have all their decisions. They're completely decisional. So as long as we have a means for them to get the help, that I would say in the last, especially 10 years, has really improved the ability to stay in your own home for less because of electronic monitoring.
Yeah.
The equipment now has so greatly improved. It, in some cases, can replace a human, and in some instances, can give you, as a daughter, peace of mind because The pendants now have, you can put it on your wrist, you can take it in the shower, you never ever take it off. It detects a fall.
Mm.
So even if someone were to go unconscious, they're still going to get the care they need. What's going to happen is someone's going to call the 24 monitoring system. If that person doesn't reply, the monitoring system is going to go down the list of who to call.
Right.
So I
Yes.
always say to families, it's very inexpensive. It gives you peace of mind, and you sort of operate by exception. As long as I never get a call, mom's fine, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's really, you can layer that in with face-to-face services. So you get some eyes on a person. You can help them accomplish the things that they're at greatest risk, like getting in and out of the shower. It's a very risky, task. We can take some of the tasks off the children that they're doing because they're
They
doing
have
it for
to.
their parents, but they'd rather not. They'd
Yeah.
rather just
Yes.
spend quality time with mom and dad. Let us clean the refrigerator. Let us put the grocery list together. Even if you want to do the grocery shopping, let us do some of those little tasks, right? And so it's just finding the right layers, like you said, and it ebbs and flows. And we are trained to keep an eye on those subtle changes.
Yeah, and I think that an agency that does that will be set apart from one that is
Yeah,
simply providing hours, you know?
right.
So it's really something for agencies to aspire to. I want to get a little bit more into that kind of dynamics, mediation. I know I was a salesperson for senior living, so they're coming for a tour. Their dad does not want to be there, and now they're panicking and saying that my dad's 24-hour care, and now another sibling disagrees, or one wants to get rid of the house, the other doesn't. So I always used to say family dynamics is my middle name. And it's such a big part of being a caregiver. Am I right? It's not just about being able to have the skill set of giving a bath or doing a transfer. So, what are ways that you have found effective in dealing with, mediating conflicts between adult children when they're worried and well
Yeah,
intentioned? So, what are some
right.
of what comes to mind? I'm sure you have many stories, but
Yeah. I think it almost always is a challenge for an adult child to recognize it's my role now to look out for what's best for my mother or father, right?
yeah.
We have been, if we're all lucky, we've had good parents and they always looked out for what's best for us, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes we might want to go do something and they tell us, no, you can do A or you can do B, but you can't do C. And that's what you want to do, right? And they're doing that for our best interest. And so when you reach a point where mom and dad are more vulnerable for whatever reason, and now it's your responsibility to guide them in what's best for them, almost always, most seniors don't want to give up independence,
Yeah.
right? So that the children often naturally start picking up extra roles, right? Stopping by more often, taking on paying the bills, whatever it might be. And so when they finally sit down with an agency and say, I think we need some care, some supportive care, the parents will often say, I don't need any help, and the adult child's behind them going, yes, they do.
Yeah.
They do need help because I'm
Yeah.
doing, 10 hours a week of care with my mother. So it's that struggle for independence and that emotional challenge of the dynamic of now it's my role to say, Mom, you can't stay home all by yourself. You do need help. So we have to make a choice, either A or B, right? Either you accept help into the home or we have to think about maybe a move, you know?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that look of this is not they can't drive, they shouldn't, or the worst, they shouldn't be driving and they are.
Right.
It's a really scary one. I find often with my peer group who are not experienced as we are, and we've seen a few scenarios and stories that guide our own experience, but I often see that there's this almost sense of manic excitement when they're taking on that role because it's so
Mm,
overwhelming, but it's such a big responsibility and they take it so seriously. And it comes from such a great place. But
mhm.
often I find that they pick up these buzzwords of like, oh, my mom is 24-hour care. And it's like, okay, let's take a
Sure,
deep breath and slow down
sure.
because I think that your mom deserves to have the autonomy that she still can have and thrive in. So it's almost like your your staff and yourself and myself in these scenarios are playing truly a mediating role to say, okay, I hear you. It's a valid concern, but woo, let's not rip away everything all at once. Let's try to maintain as much as normalcy as possible. So I love that.
I love that you said that, Carolina, because it got me thinking about the calls that we get, right? Because as you said, it's
Uh-huh.
sort of a manic, hey, we're in a situation, my mom needs a nurse
Yeah.
or 24/7
An
care, right?
RN.
An
Yeah, they need an
RN.
RN now. It's like,
Yes.
no, they
That.
stubbed their toe. Yeah.
And it's funny because then we are trained, I've trained my staff, and we will say, tell me what's going on. And once we can break
Yeah.
down what's going on, there's all sorts of good news. We get to say to them, well, here's the good news. The good news is it doesn't sound, based on what you're telling me, that they might need 24/7 care. The other piece of that puzzle is a nurse is going to cost you about 3 or 4 times more than an actual caregiver, which is what your mom is looking for. So we can help you figure out the right plan, and it's probably going to fit in your budget.
Yeah, and then they're like relieved and so thankful that okay,
Yes.
you're really helping to solve problems at the end of the day,
Yes,
for
for
sure.
sure.
And I'm sure in your kind of peer group and your social community that you've seen that through your life, the calls to you from friends that have no idea, and you just
Mhm.
think, my goodness, there needs to be more education. You had mentioned in a previous conversation that you had done like a morning show. Was this the topic of that? Was it about care?
Yeah. So again, part of my business mission statement is to educate my community about the options available. And so I have chosen to have a very heavy education resource. And so probably 2, 3 times a month, I'm out there in communities, educating them about all the different options. And then usually once a month, I'm on a local show called The Morning Blend. And I've been on that show once a month for probably 6 years now. So they have given me a designation of their senior care expert, which I appreciate.
Oh, I love
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's
People are getting ready
wonderful.
for work and you're telling them,
Yes.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
it's
great.
funny because it's played in the morning and it's played at noon. And I've noticed the morning is usually the person who might need my service.
Hmm.
And the noon hours, almost always the decision maker, the adult child. We get more calls from the noon show because
Of
it's the
course.
adult children who say, oh, I think this is something mom should look into. But yeah, what I have learned over the last couple of years and what I've noticed is a trend from well-meaning adult children who are starting to think moving is inevitable.
Hmm.
Eventually, mom is going to have to leave home. And I feel so passionate about that because I used to open and license group living. I have respect for every level of care. There is a purpose for skilled nursing. There's a purpose for group living, and there's a purpose for living in your own home. And what we still see pretty steady is the stats are almost 90% of seniors would prefer to live in their own home,
Yep.
right? So, how do we help them do that and allay the fears of their children or help their children understand how to do that? How does mom stay in her own home if she needs a nurse? How does mom stay in her own home if she needs supervision? How can we afford it? All of that, that's you only know those things if you sit down and talk with us. And especially with my office, that's our goal.
Yeah.
Let's talk about everything else before we talk about our services because there might be funding. You know, you might have an opportunity to provide support to your mother to live in her own home. And if she has memory issues, she's in a better place in her own home than she would be to move to a brand new environment.
So that makes me think of another question that I had for you, and that's the words risk and also like emotional benefit of stability. So
Sure.
that is also a tug of war, isn't it? Because when you're
Yes.
thinking about somebody living in their own home, you might just think risk, risk, risk. But then, I mean, we've seen it first day in a new community and they have modest uh, cognitive decline and now they're wandering. So
Sure.
the solution of like, I want to take the risk out to move them, and that assumption of moving them does not necessarily take away the risk. And sometimes there could be an
Exactly.
emotional decline because of it. So
Yeah.
whether it's how you advise families or how you assess, would you say that there is a part of mediating families and negotiating what the next step is accepting some risk and then also looking at what they want and what the emotional benefit of a decision would be?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. It really makes me think about, the first half of my career when I spent so much time working with people with disabilities, understanding what their disability is, but more importantly, what their abilities are. We all live a life with a level of risk. If you are
Mm-hmm.
decisional, you're accepting a level of risk, right?
Yeah.
And so just having a chronic health condition as a senior that makes you frail doesn't remove all your choices, right? So we all want to live with that element of risk, and that's really how we weigh it. If you have the appropriate care and supervision in your own home, truthfully, and it's not a judgment of one or the other, but truthfully, you're reducing your risks at home because you're one to one, right? One caregiver to one person. So you're reducing that risk greatly. Moving into a community where they have staff 24/7 even doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to have their eyes on your mom. And
No.
and you know this from experience too. Often families will move their loved one into a community and that's still not enough. So then they have to hire us on top of
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
We're the
Yeah.
second layer. So we always say, try it first at home. Let's assess what risks there are and what you're willing to do, and that's going to determine the schedule. Sometimes it's continuous care, but it doesn't always have to be. Sometimes it can be looped in with family who want to be part of that as well. So it's really weighing what is a conservative risk, right? Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Is that an
And quality of
oxymoron?
life. And quality of life as well,
And
right?
quality of
I
life.
think even to my daughter, like she just has a different sensibility even than her friends. Like her best friend is very risk averse. My daughter is just kind of a risk taker. So we've almost decided like, let's let her do the monkey bars at this age, even though it's everyone's kind of looking. And so you're right. If you're living an intentional life, you are going to be accepting some risk. We do that from the time our children are very small, and that doesn't change. So I love that. And it also, that assumption about every time, like somebody without the education, they haven't listened to the morning blend. They don't know yet, but they may assume that, okay, moving my mom to A, B, or C community will be the answer to my problems. But it is a scale, it is a spectrum. And as you know, if it's an independent living facility, there is no help included. You're lucky if you have a couple of meals included, in fact. And they
Sure.
may even need to continue to make their own breakfast and find their way to things. So I think it's also, you're right, educating them on all the options, but not necessarily jumping to that conclusion because it could be so disruptive to the life that they know and the home that they know.
This is the truth. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And I have noticed, and this is not, hard data, but I've just noticed over these last 15 years, when families start calling that they need that support, on average, we're looking out maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years of family, your loved one needing that level of support. Of course, there are those outliers, but when you think about it that way, because families are trying to guess, right? What does the future look like? Realistically, they're really trying to say, does mom or dad have enough finance to manage
Hmm.
that care and support? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? And that's what I see. So, we've made it really intentional to try to make sure that care and supervision fits within a budget, to make sure that they understand that 28 hours a week is what is the maximum that you can get in an assisted living. And it's not, eyes on at all times. So we can actually do that for less,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
less disruption. Yeah.
and
And less
less disruption. And then if you decide I want more care, you're making a purposeful choice. It doesn't mean that because it costs more, you want to move. It just means it's one of the options, right?
yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
So when I think about also this tug and war and the ways that, our caregivers and our staff and ourselves, how we can assist in that tug of war and maybe bring some third party sensibility to it, advising. I do think of the complex circles of care. So if only these conversations were with one stubborn adult daughter, but often there's many players here. And whether you're at home or whether you transition to a community, would you agree with me in saying that circle of care still continues to be a major part of that ecosystem that's so important? So when you look at your experiences, is there any, maybe it's something that's an indication of a circle of care that really works, or something to avoid, as a group, because there's so many opinions,
Yeah.
interests, sensibilities, and it can be so complex. What do you have to say about that aspect of it?
Yeah, it's a very practical um, tip, but what we have said to families when they say, well, we're going to schedule our time at 4 o'clock on a Thursday because we want all of the siblings to attend, your alarms sort of go off. You go, all right, here we go. This is going to be
Yeah,
interesting, right? And so really what we suggest is assign one person to be our contact and
yeah,
let that person disseminate the information. Of course, we're not discouraging anyone from calling, but just to be practical and to have clear communication. And oftentimes with adult children, even an email is a simple thing to send out because it's in black and white and they may be driving and they have time to go back and look at it. And then they can, pass it on to everybody else.
yeah. I think that's practical advice with every type of, and I don't want to call it a project, but I think of like Care Smarts is a technology tool.
Right,
And when you've got four people from an agency reaching out, asking the same question, and each of them maybe even searching for a different answer, that's why it's always like, who's going to be the champion? Not that everyone won't have a stake in it, but it's
right.
almost like that advocate that streamlines, and it makes sense for anything. So of course that would make, that's great advice for this type
Yeah.
of, and especially with a busy, the busy schedules today and all of the things that are in the day. If you can take on that role, then that would streamline it. So I love that. I guess to end, I would love, you mentioned the show that you are on, that people call in and there's a demand for it, as well as committing yourself to go out and be in the community to educate. So what are some of the resources in your area that you would recommend to those caregivers or even those seniors that are starting to experience changes, so that they can start to educate themselves and empower themselves to be able to have a stake in their own decisions? What are some resources you would recommend?
Yeah. The first thing that I always think about is home health services. So we sometimes have to explain the difference. Home health means health insurance, means usually Medicare. And often when someone has a change of condition, even if they're in our services, they could qualify for some home health
As well.
services, right? Nursing, physical therapy, all of that. And so we want to be sure to remind our families, let's bring home health back in. This is a tool that's free because it's covered under your insurance or at a minimal cost for copays. And it's helping reinforce even to our caregivers what the change and the new way of doing things. So first, home health. The second thing we always want to look at is, does the person have other benefits that they qualify for, like long-term care insurance to help pay for our services? Do they qualify for veterans benefits, whether it's a veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran? Are there grants in your community that you qualify for because you are providing care? And respite grants are really big across the country. So those are the things that we look at for funding because I just really want to help people stretch their dollar. And again, with the electronic monitoring, can we layer in some
Mhm.
electronic monitoring? The other thing that we see in our community is private case management. And just like hiring an attorney who
Yeah.
specializes in estate planning is a small investment, but well worth it. The same thing with private case management. It may be a small investment for that family, but they're going to get down to the needs that your family member has, that family isn't equipped to do, synergy is not equipped to do, and they can get right down to it, and be efficient. That's a good use of your funds.
Dollars,
Yes.
absolutely. And I think of like, all the different skill sets that we all carry with us. And sometimes we have these blind spots that only years of experience can give you. I know we're probably the same when we're in a home, Ruth. You look around and you and I know, okay, yeah, like I'm seeing the garbage is empty. this frozen food in the fridge, piles and piles of unopened Tupperware. Clothes are smelling. And these are things that we our trained eye and that of your staff can see. So it's almost like recognizing the blind spot that we may have, not because we lack intelligence, but because, hey, I don't know how to fix a dishwasher.
Right, right.
I don't know what's wrong with the car. The code comes off and I'm just like, somebody please help me.
Exactly.
And so
Same.
I'm the type of person that, an auto shop could take advantage of because I don't know. And so it's really putting yourself in a position to be more empowered. So I love that idea. So, and I think that's a growing field. Would you agree, Ruth, that there's more
It is.
private case management? Yeah.
I agree. Private nursing and private case management. When you're in the hospital, when you're in a rehab, you have that social service aspect, and that goes away, even after home health, they usually have a layer of that. So, and you got me thinking about extreme weather. During extreme heat and extreme cold, it's so important to have a second set of eyes. Our caregivers see things like, you may be over the phone trying to explain to your mother, what does the thermostat say? Thermostats are
Oh,
confusing.
for me.
They are. They
Yeah.
are. You want someone to go into the home and say, oh my gosh, this house, or frankly, some of our clients are very thrifty and they don't want to turn the air on, right?
Yes.
And they don't recognize how dangerously hot their home is, or, they have memory issues and they've forgotten, did I drink a glass of water? Did I take my meds? That extra layer can
Yeah.
really be life-saving.
And it really, if you really think about it, to those that are listening that are family members, I mean, I forget to drink water all the time, but the consequences are not as detrimental to me because I
Yeah.
don't have those underlying, maybe, underlying issues, but also just those that come with age. So and I'm sure when I describe this to my friends who are not from healthcare, and I say, sometimes when somebody's agitated, it gets a UTI, or they haven't gone to the bathroom in a while, and people don't realize that. So I want to end by talking to you a little bit about family members who are trying their best to advocate super remotely. So you've got a
Yeah.
daughter who's out of the country. So when you see those situations, can you talk a bit about that? Because I think that they're almost, in my experience, more in a rush to take their loved one and move them somewhere where they believe that those eyes are going to be on them. So what are some of the solutions that you've come up with somebody who
Yeah.
really just wants to be present but can't be because
I
they live
think that
far or
we, yeah, I think that we as a team have to recognize that family's situation. How can we sort of be a concierge, right?
yeah.
If it's, they can't deal remotely with the house, the furnace going down, we need to have resources for them. And we need to educate our caregivers to be alert to those types of things, repairs around the house, so that we can call the daughter and say, it looks like you're the guy who does your lawn, he hasn't come by for a couple of weeks, but we've got a couple of names. Would you like them? How can we make it easier for them and give them some solutions like a concierge, right?
Yeah.
And I always say to the adult children, whether they live remotely or whether they live at home, there are things that you can do for your parents, and there are things that you should do.
Hmm.
Even the spouse, can you take care of your loved one 24/7? Yes. Should you?
Yeah.
Right? You and I both had experience, and I had experience with my parents. Sometimes I would go to my mother and father's house and clean their toilets because I knew my mom didn't have time, right? And one time I did that, and she was literally standing behind me. I'll never forget this. And I was on my hands and knees cleaning the toilet, and she was standing behind me because she just wanted to talk to her daughter.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was so powerful to me. And I thought, I can hire people to take care of my
Yes.
mom's bathrooms. My mom
Yeah.
wants Ruth. She needs
Yeah.
time with me. So it's the can I and should I.
I love that. I
Yeah.
want everyone to walk away thinking about the can I, should I. Probably something that we should think about
Yeah.
a lot in life. But today's, so you had me tearing up there. Yeah. Well, I so appreciate your time. Bless you and your agency. Everybody, please keep an eye out for Synergy Home Care of Southeast Wisconsin, as well as, was it the Morning Blend?
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
The
or
Morning Blend,
catch her
WTMJ4.
absolutely for a resource. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you, Ruth. I thank you for your time, for your
Thank you,
expertise,
Carolina.
and all of the ways that your agency serve your community. We appreciate you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you again to Ruth Busalacchi for sharing your expertise and your experience, and to our audience for, as always, tuning in. Until next time, my name is Carolina Gonzaga, signing off from CareSmarts 360 on air.